King Jaehaerys reigned over nearly 60 years of peace and prosperity. But tragedy had claimed both his sons, leaving his succession in doubt.
Not gonna lie, this concerns me. If you haven't read Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin, a history of roughly the first 150 years of the Targaryen dynasty in Westeros, this may not seem like a big deal, but Jaehaerys the Conciliator actually had 6 sons. Prince Aegon died 3 days after he was born. Prince Aemon was killed by Myrish pirates about 9 years before the Great Council, which opens House of the Dragon. His daughter, Rhaenys, plays a big role in House of the Dragon. Baelon, father of Viserys and Daemon, 2 other important characters in House of the Dragon, died of a burst belly the same year as the Great Council. There was also Prince Gaemon and Prince Valerian, both dead within a year, a couple of decades and change before the Great Council. Then you have Archmaester Vaegon, also known as Vaegon the Dragonless, who is not dead when you get to the Great Council. No big deal. In the show, Jaehaerys calls a Great Council. The Council chooses Viserys, like in the books. Who cares if the show makes a teensy change, 2 sons instead of 6? The end result is the same. The reason I'm concerned is Game of Thrones would do the same thing. Let's change a little thing, nobody will care, and it ends up being a big deal. One of the lesser things that is still pretty huge is Cersei's kids. In the books, she has 3 kids by her brother Jaime. When she was a kid, this old witch, Maggie the Frog, prophesied Cersei would have 3 kids. Gold shall be their crowns and gold their shrouds. This almost certainly means they will have golden blonde hair, which Cersei's kids do. So far, so good. Except in Season 1, Episode 2, Cersei tells Cat Stark she had a baby with Robert, a black-haired beauty. Was she lying? Well, no, because she and Robert talk about this same baby in Episode 5. This might be fine if the show didn't later show Maggie the Frog making this prophecy to Cersei, saying she would have 3 kids. I get why they made this change. They wanted to humanize Cersei a bit, but it breaks the lore. Not the worst change the show made, but if Maggie the Frog was wrong about this, what else was she wrong about? What's frustrating is, I'm not sure why House of the Dragon made this change. Sure, we've got a lot of ground to cover in a short number of episodes, and all things considered, they did a remarkable job. But this odd phrasing, which doesn't even say the 2 sons are dead, just that tragedy claimed them, doesn't leave a lot of room for Vaegon the Dragonless. They didn't even have to say how many kids Jaehaerys had, did they? If you're pressed for time, mention the 60 years of prosperity, then say there was a succession crisis, and that leaves it open for Vaegon to still exist in the show. Why is this a big deal? Of all of Jaehaerys and Alysanne's kids, Vaegon didn't have any interest in marriage, didn't enjoy fighting, never took a dragon for himself, either out of choice or maybe an egg never hatched for him. I don't think that was made clear. He liked books, and eventually he was sent to Old Town where he became Archmaester. When Jaehaerys realized he was getting older, and I'm getting older too, and with no sons except for Vaegon to take the throne once Jaehaerys died, he had a problem. Since Vaegon had no children of his own, it would make no sense for him to take the throne. One of Jaehaerys' descendants would take the throne, either Rhaenys' son Laenor, who was 7, or Jaehaerys' grandson Viserys. Since Rhaenys' father Aemon was the older heir, technically she would have been next in line, or rather her son Laenor. And with how young Laenor was, it's possible there might have been some concerns over a woman holding so much power until he came of age. There's a theory going around, not going to get into it, that the Maesters may have fixed the results of this vote to their liking. The idea of the Great Council came from Vaegon the Dragonless. And if the Maesters were fixing the ballot, was Vaegon complicit in this conspiracy? We're told he didn't have much warmth for his family, so was he okay with screwing over his niece? Once you get to Viserys' second marriage to Alicent Hightower, they have 4 kids. We see 3 of them in House of the Dragon Season 1, Aegon, Aemond, and Helaena. Their third son, Daeron, is being fostered by his great uncle at Old Town. Season 1 did a remarkable job showing decades of political intrigue with dozens of moving pieces, but this is one spot I think they could have worked a little harder at. Pretty much anyone who watched Season 1 and didn't read Fire and Blood is going to be very confused if Daeron shows up. I think they could have just once had Alicent ask her dad how Daeron is doing. Neither here nor there. Daeron grew up at Old Town, where his great-uncle Vaegon lives. I didn't come up with this idea, but if House of the Dragon Episode 1 hadn't already pretty much made it impossible for Vaegon to show up, it would have been a given for Vaegon and Daeron to be interacting at some point. And I especially want to shout out the parallels with Vaegon and Aemon Targaryen in Game of Thrones. Both are princes who passed on the throne, were never fighting men, but nevertheless held some responsibility for some awful stuff that happened later. I 1,000,000,000% believe Aemon blamed himself for his younger brother likely initiating the tragedy at Summerhall, which killed a huge swath of their family. Did Vaegon blame himself for setting up the Great Council once a huge war kicked off? Maybe a different civil war would have launched if Laenor had been king. There's no way Vaegon could have known that. Does Vaegon wonder if things would have turned out differently if he had offered his counsel to his nephew Viserys? While Daeron is definitely the least awful of Viserys' sons, he did burn a town. Admittedly, it was to avenge the death of his infant nephew, but still, quite a few innocents died in that affair. Does Daeron regret his actions? Would he and Vaegon have this in common? Fire and Blood covers 150 years, so while season 1 of House of the Dragon had a lot of time to cover, they also had to make a lot of stuff up, with the blessing of George R.R. Martin, who was pretty involved in the show, because even the couple of decades covered by season 1 is only about one chapter in Fire and Blood. But once you get to the start of the Dance of the Dragons, I'm not sure they'll be inventing as much stuff up that we didn't see in the book, because the Dance of the Dragons is a lot more detailed than the lead up to the dance. They are adding and expanding on some stuff. For example, Hugh the Hammer is one of the Dragon Seeds who joins Team Rhaenyra, but in the show, he shows up earlier doing stuff we didn't see in the book. But even if the opening of the series allowed it, I'm not sure if they would have brought in Vaegon to talk philosophy with his grandnephew. I'm not sure if the series considers Vaegon to be as important as I do. Even as much of a horse's anus as he is to his family, he likes books, and I can't fault him for that. But this video isn't just me ranting about what I think would be cool. The whole A Song of Ice and Fire universe is about parallels. Cregan Stark is basically what if Ned Stark didn't play politics, came in, cleaned house, and left. The Bloodstone Emperor killed his older sister in his bid for more power. Sound familiar? Oh, spoilers. There are way too many parallels between Vaegon and Aemon to pass an opportunity like this, which is a huge shame the series seems to have already killed off Vaegon before he was given a chance to shine. Which is even weirder still when it looks like HBO wants to build a big A Song of Ice and Fire universe of TV shows. That task becomes a lot trickier when they take matters into their own hands and write someone out who may be important later. Not saying Vaegon is super important in the grand scheme of things, but we might not be so lucky next time.